Hey everyone, welcome back to the Invincible Innovation Podcast, the podcast for changemakers and innovators shaping the future of our world. I'm your host, Adima Zolkalia, product design and AI expert, and this is in this episode we have a privilege of sitting down with an AI expert and an investor to explore the boundless potential of AI driving business value and product innovation. Join us as we delve into this fascinating talk, and my guest is Tom. Hi, Tom.
Hi, great to be here.
So happy that you're here. Tom Taulli is an author, speaker, and startup advisor, and I'm sure we're going to learn from him a lot. And now we can start. We're live on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Facebook. You're so invited to join the discussion. So let's start. What are the key opportunities and challenges in creating value through generative AI in businesses today?
Yeah, and I think the way to answer that is because not everyone may know what even generative AI is,
Right.
and I think that's good place. If you're thinking about where the value is, the first place to start is to understand what this technology is about. Because where a lot of companies go wrong is they say, "Well, that's a hot technology. Let's start using it," instead of okay, we have problems to solve. Let's find a technology that best solves that problem. So
Right.
generative AI is has actually been around for decades, but the and what they mean by generative is that it creates content. Um, and the reason I say it's been around for decades is that we've had chatbots since the 1960s that generates content. But the modern idea of generative AI is based on something called the transformer model, and that came out about 2017 through a paper from Google researchers. The paper was called "Attention is All You Need," and what it there's a couple basic ideas behind the transformer model, and that is one, you use huge amounts of data, training data, and we're talking like trillions pieces of it, a whole internet, for example, as an example. So you take a lot of data, and then you use these deep learning models that takes that data and finds patterns in it. So, and the way the patterns work is just like in your iPhone, where when you start typing words in your text, it'll suggest the next word. So this is what that transformer model is doing, but on a huge scale. And it's done it in a way that really hasn't been done before, with a lot of accuracy. So it's taking all that information and finding probabilities for that next word. And then it'll find the probabilities for the word after that. And then before you know it, it starts creating this content. So you start interacting with it, and it seems like, oh my God, is this a person? Is this real or not? So that's what has become what is known as a large language model, or LLM. Um, and so, uh, and then there's also multimodal uh, generative AI, where it's about creating images or sound and things, and those are based on different models, but it's all comes under the umbrella of generative AI. So where the opportunities lie is with LLMs is word-based type, generative content. And so it could be anywhere from, and we've seen this with ChatGPT. It could be, writing a tweet, writing a blog, writing a research report. A lot of that takes a lot of time in the corporate world, and it can do that. It can summarize information. We always have to read so much information, and we don't have time to read it. But the computer and generative AI can go through that. That saves a ton of time for people. Foreign translation. Um, uh, Samsung has a new phone out that does real-time translation using generative AI. A friend who used this technology in Japan, and they work perfectly. Solves a lot of problems there. So with a traditional LLM, it's really about solving those problems about creating content that would normally take a lot longer for people to create. And there's a lot of content that is tedious content. That why spend a lot of time creating that? And some of that content is computer code. Some of the earliest examples of generative AI is using these systems to create, JavaScript or C++ code and things like that. And given the shortages with tech talent, that these types of systems can be huge in terms of productivity. So, so if you're looking at as a company looking at how can I use generative AI, those are the things: is creating content, summarization, creating code, and those are just kind of on the LLM side. It also could be like chatbots where you're interacting with other people and doing it in a way that seems human. And then on the multimodal side, you can create images, which I don't know Photoshop, but you don't need to know Photoshop anymore to create great images. That saves a lot of time.
Right.
So those are
Right.
the kind of the things that you can do with this technology.
Yeah. Another thing that every company should think about is, do they have good data in order to use these systems? Because if they don't have, they're really behind, and it will be very hard for them to utilize any kind of these like technologies, right?
Yeah. So I mean, there's off the shelf. ChatGPT. You don't need data per se. You can for more sophisticated systems. There are vendors out there that um, you know for some applications you don't need to have that data. But if you're creating a chatbot based on your products, or doing something where you're creating product descriptions, or things like that, then you definitely need data. Or if you have HR, for human resources, you have certain medical plans, you have certain employee handbooks and so forth. Those are particular to your company, to your industry. So you would want to have the data for that, and that's a challenge. It's the technology is new, so you do need some expertise to work with that data and implement that into the generative AI. There's these systems called RAG and vector databases and all that that require some data science expertise, and a lot of companies just don't have that. But over time, we're going to see systems that make it easier to use whatever data you have for these
Yeah.
applications.
So if you're not using a very generic high level capabilities like what you have in ChatGPT, and you want to make it specialized into your domain, you need to have some kind of data in order to make it, especially for, let's say, lawyers or for doctors or for your specific companies and clients. And most people, when they think about generative AI, I guess that ChatGPT would be the first one, but there are others, like the Google Bard, I think it's called Gemini already, and Watson from IBM. And they're all very big models trained in like lots of data in order to give you good answers or summarizations or conclusions or even predictions, what needs to be done. And as you said, many companies, there is this very big hype that everybody's going to use AI and the competitor is going to use AI and they're going to be staying behind. But actually, they need to understand what is the need in their internal systems or external, or what could they sell to their customers in order to really understand what is the value for them.
Mhm. Yeah, exactly. And I think that's, anytime you're in the early phases of a technology revolution, a lot of companies, try to reinvent the wheel. They don't understand the technology, so they go down these rabbit holes, and they wind up spending lots of money and wasted time on things that don't move the needle. And their competitors that really are focused on solving real use cases, will zoom ahead of them. So we're at that point. It's a scary time for companies. That's why they're scrambling. But I do think they need to sit back a little bit and evaluate this technology and not go crazy with it, because it can wind up doing more harm than good.
Yeah, I think that another thing that needs to be considered is, everybody knows the benefits of what could be done, but not many people know all the calculations and how much it will cost you in order to use this system, to train them and to really use them afterwards, especially if you're going to dedicate some kind of a feature or capability to your end customers, and then it's going to be used heavily. What does that mean on the cost? And could you really create value that is higher than this kind of cost, right?
Yeah, I think that's underestimated is the cost. One, I meant mentioned data scientists. You don't necessarily have to have a PhD, but you do need to have someone that has experience those people don't come cheap right now, as you can imagine. Those are, very high salaried individuals, and they tend to go where the money is. So they may not even go to your company because they want to get, belong to OpenAI and work for companies like that. Then they go, well, we could use open source models as they're free, right? Well, yeah, but to have a to use one of these models, you still need the to operationalize it. So you
Yeah.
need to have GPUs. Well, if you looked at the GPU market, it's hard to get one of those GPUs, and if you
Yeah.
do, they're expensive. So, and then you got to host it. Again, you got just because you have data, that doesn't mean you can just use the data right out of the box. You have to
Of
wrangle
course.
that data. That takes time. And then once the model is out in the open, you have to test it and monitoring, and those are costs as well. So, you look at what that potential return is, because it may be nowhere near what you have to spend to get to where you want to go.
Right. So we talked about the cost and the value that it creates and what are the barriers that are to use it. So what are the essential considerations for companies looking to integrate generative AI into their products?
Yeah, so I would look at you mentioned earlier internal versus external. Um, I would first look at internal. If this is kind of you're starting out with this technology, external is a little higher stakes, because you don't want to have a chatbot that goes out of whack and starts saying stuff, and
Yeah.
your customers leave and go somewhere else.
Right.
And that can very easily happen because of the complexities of this technology, and it's tough to work with. So I would say, what are the internal processes? Now, I think where you can, you know, get started without a lot of effort is in areas where this technology is very good at, and one is being creative. So, again, just writing blogs or tweets, all that takes time, but it's important. Um, and you can just do that with ChatGPT. Now, there's other products like Jasper if you want to get a little more sophisticated, but you could just start with that. The other is, we got these co-pilots from Microsoft that are coming into the market. Google, like I said, Gemini with Google is implementing that within their Google documents and so forth. I think that's another area where you can start using the technology that's already there, and it's almost free. And then I think more the challenge there is not about building technology as it is change management, where you educate your employees on how to use these tools that they already have, and make that part of their workflow and their daily activities to improve their productivity. So I think those are areas you can start, and you start building those AI muscles. And so over time, you get a little bit more sophisticated. You might go where, yeah, I start using my own data, and then I go and do external capabilities and things like that. So I think it's a kind of a gradual journey with AI that I think has the best impact for an organization.
Yeah. So when you're talking about internal change, it could make the work like much faster or enhance whatever you currently have. When we're talking about external, it could be a different feature or capability or a product that you're selling. But of course, then you need more guardrails in order to prevent um, most people don't really understand that these models sometimes say something that is not true, but they say it in a very, they're very sure of what they're saying, it seems, and then you believe them. And
Mhm,
this is
mhm.
problematic. I think it's called hallucinations,
Yeah.
meaning that it says something that is not true. And when you're talking to end customers, this is a very problematic part of
Mhm,
these models.
mhm. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, there's a
yeah.
case where an auto dealership implemented a generative AI chatbot for its customers, and in certain cases, it was recommending cars of some of its rivals.
Oh, not good.
Not
That's
good.
not good.
So yeah, they are powerful. It wasn't, and the information may not have been wrong, you know,
Maybe,
but
but it's not
but
what you want your
but that's
customers
not
to
the
know.
information you want for your customers. So it could be perfectly correct answers, perfect, nothing wrong with them. But sometimes it's more about I don't want to, help my competitors,
Right.
using this technology that I'm paying for. So I think those are other things too beyond just hallucinations.
Yeah. Another thing that you mentioned, I don't want to help my competitors. Most companies would say, okay, I'm taking my data and I'm training these models, and my competitors could use these models, although it's supposed to be in your own cloud and separate, but still, can you really trust that it's not enhancing capabilities that is afterwards against you in the end?
Mhm, mhm. That's one of the concerns. Something with like ChatGPT. Be careful, about using data with some of these systems because a lot of times they're transferred to someone else's cloud and their data centers. So uh, you know now they may have their own security, but in this current environment, the hyperscalers or the big companies like OpenAI are big targets for hacks. So you you know if you have information you don't want anyone to see, don't send it out. Take the usual cybersecurity practices of, de-identify the information or anonymize the information before you send it out. And that's other part of the change management too for your employees is how to use these tools in a secure fashion. Don't use this information. Don't use certain information in these tools, but you know, use it in this way where it's more secure. So I think security is a big concern, especially for enterprises, and a lot of there's a lot of information flying around. Now the other problem is that the best data is actually the most sensitive data when it comes to AI.
Sure,
So there
sure.
is this balancing act of how can we use this sensitive data without jeopardizing privacy and security.
Yeah, I think that in general, because it's a new technology, all the security capabilities are not uh, strong enough, I would say.
Mhm.
And there are so many other use cases that you're not considering, like encrypting your data could be decrypted, and other ways that you could inject data that is not true to your model. Somebody could do some kind of hacking in that way. So there are so many ways you could really risk the most vulnerable data, especially if you're using marketing data, sales data, data about your customers, about their maybe medical records in some cases, so forth. It's really hard to know where it goes and what is the real risk there.
Yeah, and you're speaking about hallucinations. There's some examples of this where um, someone will use say a chat GPT to create code. And a lot of times when you create code, it will recommend certain packages. I mean, a lot of times coding is just stitching together different packages, Python
Yeah.
packages or whatever. But sometimes the the generative AI gets those packages wrong or makes up those packages. Um,
Hmm.
and so what some of these hackers do is they those packages don't exist, but what they do is they create those packages themselves, and then they put malware in those packages. So
Mm.
I will type in, well, how do I code this? And then I use those packages, but when I'm using those packages, I'm actually infecting my system. So you got to be really careful because these systems are so generalized. It's so hard to because they're so generalized and they act with work with so much information and so complex. It's very difficult to implement the security. So there are very tricky ways that you can wind up getting compromised and not realize it.
Yeah, I think that we discussed several of the risk. One is the cost factor. Then we talked about security. Another thing would be a legal or bias ethical problem that are with these systems. And now we have more and more regulations related to these systems that leaders should be aware of, right?
Yeah. Well,
So what do you think about all the regulations? Would they
yeah.
really work?
Well, it depends where you are. Europe is, far ahead when it comes to regulating artificial intelligence. China has been aggressive as well. The United States, we tend to have a more wild west mentality when it comes to let's just do whatever we want, and if something goes wrong, we'll fix it then. We're kind of after the fact when we fix things, and so it's so early, and not much gets done in Congress here and in our government anyway. So it's an election year too, so um, the chances of there being regulation of AI, I think, is pretty slim. So that's probably another reason to be careful when using these technologies because there are not a lot of backstops from a government standpoint.
Yeah, another thing that is not maybe related to business is the fact that we just mentioned a few use cases. For example, someone from marketing, someone who's doing copywriting, coders, so forth. We described a few positions that could be replaced or
Mhm.
maybe minimized by an AI capability.
Yeah, yeah. Wall Street Journal. I was reading it right before this webcast. Has an article today just about that topic. And Duolingo, this is a foreign language app,
Mhm.
recently cut a substantial number of their contractors. You know, there was no really reason given for this, but the suspicion is that with generative AI, do you need these contractors anymore? Um, and in marketing, if you can, a lot of this content was labor intensive, but if you can do a lot of this in seconds with generative AI. How many marketing people do you really need? So, if you look at where the productivity gains are the highest, that's probably where you're going to see the biggest threats to jobs. Computer programming as well. Um, you know, I think there's a lot of junior programmers again stitching together, you know, uh, packages, may have been able you maybe you can get a high paying job doing that today, but maybe tomorrow you can't because a lot of that will be done with computers and generative AI. So I personally believe that these tools will have an impact. And we're not seeing it now because the labor market, at least in the United States, is very strong. But I think in the next few years, as the technology becomes more ubiquitous, it's going to have an impact on jobs. And it's not clear as to how those jobs, what new jobs will be created to replace those jobs. To make up for the losses. And
Yeah.
so I think that is it's a very daunting societal challenge that we're going to face in the coming years.
Yeah. So in Duolingo, the contractors were coders, marketing people, translation people. Who were they?
Translation people. Yeah.
Yeah,
So I think
because
they had thousands of them.
wow.
Yeah, and it was a lot of people let go. It's a lot of times it's easier to let go contractors than employees. But yeah, those types of jobs. But I do think marketing jobs tend to be higher paid white collar jobs, uh, and it's not just you know you know, low skill or whatever you want to call it, lower skill type jobs that are in jeopardy. I think, those skills that, if someone goes to college, they spend 4 years getting those skills, they could be in jeopardy too, those people.
Yeah, and it could be legal people. It could be like someone from accounting. It could
Mhm.
be any kind of white collar jobs that in the beginning, like I think like 5, 10 years ago, you would say the people who are paid less would be the ones to be at risk. And now we know that people who are very educated could be at risk in maybe 4 or 5 years, not more
Mhm.
than that.
Absolutely. Yeah. So that's clearly one of the downsides of this technology. And if you're younger today or looking at a new job opportunity, probably those jobs that have higher touch, or skills that what we've talked about that computers are really not good at, maybe focus on those. But these computers are getting better and better, so it is kind of scary.
Yeah, I think that most people would say, okay, everything is technology. I need to go into technology, meaning I need
Mhm.
to know code and computer science. And now we're talking about data or
Mhm.
machine learning capabilities. But in the end, these machines would know how to build it themselves. And they would need only the senior, more advanced capabilities for someone just to manage the high level integrations together.
Absolutely.
And it's especially problematic for the younger people who did not have the time to go and learn and to get all these expertise and knowledge on the way.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think it's a problem, and I don't think we're anywhere near have anything to figure out what to do with it.
Yeah. So what do you think that leaders need to know about the future and the generative AI capabilities. We discussed what needs to be done within the companies. Do they need to know something about the different way that they will manage their work or they manage their customers, or what do they really need to know?
For those that you know these technologies are not autonomous. So there are something these are merging these things called agents that kind of do things on their own. It's kind of scary when you think about it. Yeah,
Yeah,
let them no let them figure out the you know but those agent technologies are have proven to be very ineffective so far. Um,
so far.
so far.
Yeah.
Yeah, keyword there. Now, a big emphasis for OpenAI is on this agent technology, but so far it's pretty amorphous. So what that means is that to use these generative AI technologies, you have to, you do have to kind of know how these computers think in a way, and that's where the prompt engineering comes in. So, for like computer programming, um, you can actually waste a ton of time if you're not prompting it correctly. There's sometimes when it's just quicker to do a Google search or a Stack Overflow search than to go through all the multiple prompts you'll do to get what you need to get. Um, or sometimes it's just better to have a notebook with certain things that you've been doing already, and just go to that instead of having to prompt every time. And then there are other areas where the prompts really make a difference. So in computer programming, again, let's say I have some complicated code, and I get an error message, and I have no clue really what this error message is all about and how to fix this problem. I can then write a prompt and say, look, what's going on here? How do I fix it? It'll explain it, it'll show me how to fix it, and that would save me maybe an hour's worth of time,
Yeah.
as opposed to some of the more tedious simple stuff. So I think the key is to better use this technology right now is to understand, again, kind of going back to where we started before, where the strengths are of this technology, where you get the biggest impact. And when you know that, then understanding how to use prompt engineering in a way to get the answers that you need, and also knowing when prompt engineering is not going to get you what you need. That you're just going to go in circles and prompt all day long and just waste your time. So I think now that takes education, and again, that change management, but a lot of times, employers will just say, here's your software, do what you want, and then the employees do all the things that probably really don't help, you know, further their job along, because they don't
Yeah.
have the guidance, why would you expect all of a sudden for them? Because it's not magic. This technology is not magic. It does take some education, some learned expertise to get the best of results.
Yeah. So prompt engineering is actually the input for these kinds of models, and you need to know how to structure the input in the best way in order to get the right output, the right answer, or the optimized answer for your request.
That's correct.
And it doesn't matter if it's a third party or an open source model, you need to know how to do that. And I think that most people would know when they write an email, they would say, okay, write a professional email to this person. I want to get this and this done.
Mhm.
So they could more or less understand that, but it is much more complex in order to get something which is very specific or very precise, and to know exactly what you need to get from these machines, actually.
That's right. And then also, usually the first prompt is not, especially for complicated tasks, usually the first prompt will not get what you want. Usually have more of a general prompt, and then you have a few other prompts after that to get to where you want to go.
Yeah.
And the final thing is always review the content again, because it could be wrong.
Yeah.
Now, what the nice thing about ChatGPT, it's now starting to add. So what you could say is provide links to back up your conclusions. So at
Yeah.
least you have some basis in reality, to go off of. So that's another technique as
Yeah.
well.
If it doesn't imagine these links and they're
That's right.
real,
That's
right?
right. Yeah. I mean, we
Yeah.
had there's cases where it'll create a hallucination, and then say, and then you'll after that you'll say find the hallucinations, and you'll go and actually find the hallucinations, even though
Yeah.
and that's where this prompting is like, if you're not telling them what you want, it'll just kind of on a probability basis give you what they think you want. So you got to
Yeah.
be clear about what your intent is, and I think that's part of the issue too when it comes to prompt engineering, is if you don't are not clear with the intent of what you're looking for, the results can be off, all over the map.
Yeah, so if we're thinking about leaders and the way they maximize the opportunities and mitigate the risk, you're saying that you need to train your people in order to get what you want from these models. It's not enough just to ask a question from ChatGPT and then to write it.
Absolutely, yeah, and I think
Yeah,
there's a lot of that going on right now where you know, they have these access to these great tools, but not clear as to how to use them in the best way.
yeah. And especially if you want something very specific, you need to really train the model in a way. It's not enough just to have a license to ChatGPT and just to talk with it.
Right.
And if you're thinking about having these capabilities for your specific domain, internal or external, you need to really work with it. It's not that it knows everything. You need to be
Yeah,
very specific in your domain,
absolutely.
of course. And tell me, as an investor, what do you look for in an AI startup or an AI capability? And what advice would you give entrepreneurs in that space?
Hmm. Yeah, so uh, I think it's tough now because if you look at the venture capital statistics, majority of that money is going into AI or generative AI, and what that means is that there's so many different companies in this category, and then there are companies that have been around for a while that maybe not were not really generative AI, but suddenly are call themselves generative AI companies.
Yeah.
So the first hurdle is trying to find out what's real and what's not, and that's not easy to do. So I would not look at, again, it's kind of like the solving the problem. Uh, at the end of the day, I think that the best question to always ask is what problem are you solving, not what technology is driving this per se. And because I think there's a lot of great technologies out there that don't have to be generative AI to be great businesses, and they may not get a lot of attention. So there might be more opportunity there where you get better valuations and better terms versus the others where it's so hot and you know uh, the hype is so intense that it's hard to figure out what where to go. So I think I start with that question, and then I look at is do you have some examples of companies that have really or customers that really see the value in this software. Um, so I mean, Duolingo is consumer, but I think that's an excellent example of a company that clearly they have tens of millions of people paying to use this product.
Right.
It's hard to get people to pay for anything online, and for them to do that, that's pretty remarkable. So obviously they're doing something right. So if you can, if there's already some proof points about the technology that customers are using it and getting value and staying and maybe buying more of the technology over time, those are the kinds of things I like to see. But not necessarily that they have to be generative AI. Now, if they are, that's fine. But I would not look at investment just because it's generative AI.
Yeah, I think that as we started talking about it, it's a very big hype,
Mhm.
and people don't really understand what are the boundaries, what are the risks, what it could be relevant for, what is not relevant for it. And even if it could answer, you gave an example, if it's much easier just to go to Google and ask a question. In some cases, it's much easier to use the current tools in order to get better answers. And
Yeah.
sometimes it's not the best way to get an answer of what you need. And another thing that comes to my mind is the fact that many of these systems are taking something very basic, meaning it needs to be a text, use a specific text in order to get an answer. And they're not thinking exactly what is needed. So not most people don't want to write long sentences in order to get an answer, especially if they know exactly what they need.
That's
Sometimes you
right.
just need to press a button and then you get an answer. You don't need to
Exactly.
go and do all of that.
Yeah.
So really understanding where it's relevant and where it's not relevant.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, and I think the other thing, I was at the QuickBooks conference last year, and a lot of their customers are not necessarily tech people. So they implemented generative AI in QuickBooks and some of their test beta customers. And what they found is a lot of people didn't even, there'd be this box and people didn't know what to do with it. So they wouldn't even
Right.
put anything in there because they didn't like, where do I even start? So what they did is they had these things called chips, which are suggested prompts based upon the context of where they are in that program. And then they would just click that prompt and get the answer they were looking for instead of having to type out the whole thing and having to figure out like, well, how do I even come
Just
up
a
with a
button.
prompt?
It's just a
That's right. It's,
button. I
it's
want to
just a
get,
button.
it looks like a chip, but it's a button. I want to have an answer for that. That's it.
Exactly. So, yeah, I think the whole user experience, you got to be very careful with this technology because of that, because, those who are in the technology industry, they kind of, because they live and breathe it, you know, they know what to do and how to interact with it. But most people don't, are not in that
Yeah.
bubble. So, and those are a lot of customers, you're
Of
missing
course,
out
they're
on.
most of the customers, I
That's
would say.
right. That's
Yeah.
right.
I'm currently writing a course
Mhm,
for creating generative AI products, and I have one lesson about UX for AI. I'll take this example anyway.
mhm.
Yeah. And it's very funny because I feel that what we have with generative AI is very close to what we had with DOS before the
Mhm,
Windows
mhm.
came.
Good
So it's
example.
really it's native. It's only the beginning. It's the technology being transparent to the outer layer of the front layer of the application. It's the same, but actually
Mhm.
what people need is the windows. They need the buttons, and they
That's
don't
right.
care about the calculations in the end. And
Right.
what you said about the chips is exactly that, because
Mhm,
when I'm in a accounting system,
mhm,
I want to know something about my balance, about my
mhm,
money, about my
mhm.
receipts, whatever. I'm not interested in talking about philosophy with this machine. So yeah, so what is relevant? This is
Mhm,
what they need to get. That's
mhm,
it.
mhm,
And currently you see the implementations of many generative AI capabilities is these chats you could write in,
mhm,
which doesn't make sense.
mhm,
Like
mhm,
I'm inside a world, inside a domain, inside an application. I know what I want and what I don't want.
mhm.
And it's like, I don't need that actually in many cases.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. I think some of this, the UX has been underappreciated. And but I do think there needs to, for companies, I think they need to focus on this a lot more because ChatGPT is chat. So, by its name, that's the concept, you know,
right.
but that doesn't mean you take ChatGPT and apply it the same way to accounting software, you know.
Yeah.
So, and I think that's a big mistake being made by a lot of vendors and tech vendors at this point is that they're not they're I think the DOS example is good. That if you're a sophisticated coder, DOS is amazing. But if you want a word processor, you don't want DOS. You know,
Right.
you want buttons.
Right.
You want WYSIWYG. You want all that kind of stuff. And so, you gotta, again, look at what the customer wants, not just based upon,
Yeah.
how people say technology should be.
Yeah, and these systems are usually created by a person who comes from technology, a
Yeah,
CTO, somebody who's coders. And coders, they love to write because this is their profession. They're
that's right.
writing all day. This is
Yeah.
what they're doing. They're writing much faster than the general public,
Mhm.
and they really love to use words because this is what they do, either in code or in other aspects. And most people don't want to write too much,
Mhm.
and it takes them longer, and they're not used to this kind of communication, writing long texts and trying to understand the answer.
Right.
While people coming from technology, this is what they're doing all the time. They're writing and they're getting answers, right? They're doing like two directional texts all the time.
Yeah. 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 I think we maybe I lost the connection there for a little bit, but I think I got
Oh,
the gist.
okay, that's good. So, how do you see the role of generative AI evolving and transforming traditional business models and industries?
Mhm. I we're still in the early days of this technology, but it's quick. So Microsoft, whenever Microsoft and Google and SAP, and all these big companies start adopting it, it's going to be here. We're going to use it. It's going to be in everyone's businesses. It'll probably be in a few years. It'll be just probably one of those things where we don't even call it generative AI. We just may not even call it AI. We just call it, just a usual feature that you go into. You know, I mean, do we even think about spell check anymore?
No,
It
auto
just it
reply.
yeah,
We
it's
have
just
we already have that in Google
exactly.
email, right?
Exactly. So there's these features that just become normal features in software, and we don't even really give much thought to them. They just become part of the natural way that we interact with technology. I think the same will be the case with generative AI. But the early stages has been mostly about language models interacting with language. I think we're going to see a lot more with images and sound and video in the next few years. And I think there's a lot of great applications there, especially for training. We talked a lot about training today, but creating training and scaling training is not easy to do. But it's a lot easier with these generative AI systems where the voices, or you don't have to record the voices. You just type in the script and the voices work, and there's video and there's animation, and so you can create these great training systems using generative AI. Marketing as well. You can create, you know, trailer videos for your products. Uh, you know, so I think there's a lot that on the multimedia side with generative AI that I think we're just starting at this point. So I think that'll be another big important part of this movement. And also think these models are going to get cheaper. They're going to get easier to use. They're going to get more powerful. And then also another trend I'm seeing is what are known as SLMs, or small language models. And especially these, especially for businesses where, like you mentioned, we don't want to have a philosophical discussion with our computer. If we have an accounting software, you know,
Right.
we want to just so what we'll have is an SLM for accounting. We'll have an SLM for law. SLM for all these different, HR. And so I think the SLM trend is something else that we're going to see, and LLMs will still be important, but for corporations, I think SLMs may be more important.
Yeah. No, when I think about it, it's like the specification and what is really needed is going from something which is very big and robust and something that could do almost everything to
Mhm.
something that is very specific to your needs and exactly what is needed within the context, within your role, within what is needed.
Right.
But what we just mentioned is it's going to be much faster and easier. And the question would be how many people you need to do in order to have a business in
Right.
general. So
Right.
I heard Sam Altman saying that it's really near that we have 10 people building a $1 billion company.
Mhm.
10 people only, and he says that it's only a matter of time when we could have one person building a 10 billion company,
Mhm. Mhm.
which is like it's very hard to comprehend how many
Mhm.
things could be done using these technologies. If we're talking about agents, it's actually it's like people working for you for
Mhm.
free, doing again and again tasks automatically, and you just tell them, okay, this is what I need. They do the research, they do the implementation, they do the deployment itself,
Mhm.
and that's it. You don't need anyone to really do all the strategy and tactics for
Mhm.
it.
Mhm. Yeah, I agree, and that they're yeah, whether we'll see a 10-person, $10 billion company anytime soon. I'm not sure. Although Instagram, I think, had 18 employees when they sold for $1 billion. So
I know.
that
That's
was that,
interesting. I
that was a
know.
long time ago.
Yeah.
So there is a lot of scale to some of these businesses, especially when something takes off, and this is usually in the consumer market. Now, it wasn't a $1 billion business in terms of revenue, but it was in terms of the market cap value to Facebook at the time. So I think now now we always say that, well, the one great advantage we as humans have is our creativity and our ingenuity. That we probably are not going to clone Steve Jobs, anytime soon, right? So
Not yet.
we still need that kind of creativity and ability, and to think about you know what products we need. But there was a study done at Wharton, their MBA program, in a class on innovation. And what they did is they split the class into students coming up with business ideas, and then the ChatGPT coming up with business ideas. And then to test to see whose were better, they would actually do an online survey of humans, and they didn't know whether it was created by ChatGPT or MBA students. And what they found is that the ChatGPT had better ideas
Oh,
than the students.
not good.
That's right. but
Yeah,
but what's interesting about that too is that, again, though, ChatGPT is not some magical thing. It's based upon the knowledge of humans and what humans have created. So, but it's doing it in a way that takes advantage of all that knowledge and does it, in a creative fashion. So, if we humans just suddenly stop doing what we're doing, then where does AI go? Because you still need that data from humans to make the AI work.
right.
So, something to think about.
Yeah, for sure.
Mm.
Okay, we're almost done. I have like two more questions. The last
Okay.
one would be like your number one tip for AI entrepreneurs today.
Yeah. So, uh, for entrepreneurs, I still go back to what problem you're solving. So it's kind of my simple go-to. Um, and then the other is, uh, you know, in this market today, the markets can get opinionated. So it's like this is the way you do, like we talked about, the user interface and so forth. Markets can, get opinionated in that this is the way it's done and this is the way it's done. And anytime you hear someone say this is the way it's done or has to be done, that could be an opportunity. It's like because a lot of times businesses, the great businesses, are ones that are doing it the way it has never been done before. Now, that's not just to say to be completely contrarian all the time. There may be a reason why everyone's doing it that way because it works. But analyze that. Don't take it on face value because there may be an idea there. That when everyone says this is the way it should be done, maybe I should consider the alternative. And maybe the alternative is better. And if that's the case, I have an advantage because everyone's going this way and I'm the only one going this way, but this way is actually better. So, I think that's something else in this kind of market to consider, as an entrepreneur. Don't get caught up in the hype and the opinions of others who think that this is the way it should be done.
Yeah, it reminds me of an application that is a dating app, and most people really hate going to first dates.
Mhm.
So what they did, they took all your ideas, what you are looking for, what is important to you, so forth. It's like building a profile for who you are, and this profile that represents you would go and date other profiles, and you could see the chats, so you could see what they talk about, and then you say, okay, this looks like a good first date,
Mhm.
virtual first date, so I would go with this person.
That's a
So
great idea. Yeah,
yeah,
that's
and,
pretty
and I
creative.
know if it's working, but
Yeah.
I know that it's live and it's out there. So maybe people could think about that. Okay, thank you, Tom, for your time. It's
Yeah,
been a very eye-opening and insightful to talk with you. It's
yeah,
been a
you as well.
pleasure. So where could people hear more about you and contact you if they want?
Yeah, probably the best way to contact me is either on LinkedIn. So you just I'm probably the only one with Tom at Taulli on LinkedIn. So that's a great way to contact me. Or
Yeah.
Twitter, I'm at TTAULLI, and feel free to connect with me there. I also post my articles and recent things
Yeah, this is
on
how
there
I
as well.
find you.
Okay, there you go. So I'm usually use those every week.
Thank
Yeah,
you. Thank you, Joe, for
thank
your
you.
time. It's been very insightful and interesting. And thank you for all change makers out there. Thank you for joining us. And if you found this episode valuable and insightful, please share it with others. And I'll see you next week with another innovative, insightful talk. See ya. Bye bye.